The addition of the college football playoff has added extra intrigue to every college football season since its inauguration back in 2014, or the best teams in the country. Otherwise, ultimately, the college football playoff in its current format has done a lot more damage to the sport than it's helped. Unless you're a consistent powerhouse, the college football playoff has ruined the sport for you. Let me explain. I'm aware of the much needed college football playoff expansion from 4 teams to 12 teams that's coming after the next season. And hopefully it can help remedy some of the issues that the current college football playoff format has created. The one problem that it will immediately fix is how few programs feel like they can say they've had a successful season come the end of the year. Back in the days before the playoff, in the days of the one BCS championship game, only 2 teams had a chance at the title. So the expectation put on a good program at the beginning of the year wasn't to make a playoff, it was to make either the national championship or one of the big BCS bowl games. That being either the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Orange Bowl, or Sugar Bowl. Originally, one of these 4 bowl games would host the national championship game for the year and it would rotate between the 4. But in the 06-07 season, a standalone national championship game was added. As long as a program made one of these prestigious games and won, they could call the season a relative success, because only the elite teams could make these bowl games, and only a team that went undefeated was likely to make the national championship game. Sometimes, even that wasn't good enough. The system was by no means perfect, but it highlighted 10 of the best teams in the country. Now, with the expansion to the playoff, even just to 4 teams are hiring coaches with the expectation going in that they're going to be competing for a playoff spot, and anything less is seen as a disappointment for the year, especially at the top programs. With the expansion to 12 teams now, the 6 best conference champions plus 6 at-large teams getting in, more teams are going to have a national spotlight share. More teams are going to feel like they accomplished a goal for the season. In the current format, the BCS Bowl games, along with the addition of the Cotton Bowl and the Peach Bowl, are used on a rotating cycle as the semifinal games. So only once every 3 years do these bowl games reach the same second tier of relevance that they used to right behind the national championship. But even when they do, they're only remembered as the semifinal games, not as the Rose Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl anymore, just as the semis. Tell me honestly right now, the games we just saw last week, the ones that Georgia and TCU just won, what were the bowl games? Not called the semifinals. What were the bowl games? You probably don't know. And you probably don't care. And I don't blame you. Because the players don't care either. Because they're not playing to lift those trophies. They're playing to lift that one. By the way, is the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, if you care. This is the one consequence of the playoff that I don't think can ever truly be fixed, even with the expansion to 12 teams. I don't think the meaning of these playoff games will ever be truly returned to what it was pre-playoff era. If you want some data, the Cotton Bowl averaged 4.17 million viewers this year. That's the lowest it's been since 2005, before it was even involved in the BCS Bowl games. The Rose Bowl averaged 10.19 million this year. That sounds a lot better, and it is, but that's the lowest it's ever been for the Rose Bowl in its recorded history. A bowl game that has existed for 100 years. That was the lowest rating it has ever gotten. And if the fans now only care about one bowl game and the boosters only care about one bowl game, the players now only care about one bowl game. Because the players, yeah, they're in college to improve their game, yes. To get an education, sure. But all that grind, all that learning, all that improvement is to make their dreams happen and get to the NFL, to get drafted and get paid millions of dollars to play the game they love. What gives them the best chance to make that happen? Building up their profile, building up their name. The chance to make themselves a household name doesn't lie in the Rose Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl anymore. It lies in the national championship game and the national championship game alone. And if it lies only in that game, they're only going to go to programs that give them a chance to make that game. That's why I don't know if we'll ever get bowl games as memorable as we got back in the BCS era. Back in 2007 in the Fiesta Bowl when Oklahoma and Adrian Peterson took on the underdog Boise State team and got taken to overtime on a last-minute drive and an insane hook and ladder play, then defeated by a gutsy Statue of Liberty behind-the-back handoff that we'd never seen before that scored the game-winning 2-point conversion. Or the 2005 Rose Bowl that saw the Vince Young-led Texas Longhorns face a freshman Chad Henne and the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan led by 10 entering the fourth, but Young added even more yards to his impressive rushing total with a 23-yard touchdown to take the lead with 5 minutes left. Michigan would march down the field to take the lead again, but Vince Young would not be denied. The eventual Rose Bowl MVP got Texas close enough to kick the game-winning field goal. But now more than ever, players that are NFL draft-bound are opting out of bowl games, because playing in a pointless bowl game that's not going to raise your draft stock is stupid. So why would you? This is the main reason why college football has been seeing a lack of parity at the top since the playoffs started. Sure, the best players are always going to want to play for the best programs, but the list of teams that the best recruits now believe in to make a meaningful bowl game has shrunk by a lot, because there is now only one important bowl game. The college football playoff in its current format has existed for 9 years. With 4 spots open every year, my calculator tells me that there are 36 total berths have been available. Of those 36 berths, they've only been filled by 14 different teams. Of those 14 teams, half of them have only been included in the playoff once. The other 7 include Michigan and Notre Dame, who both have been in twice, Georgia 3 times, Oklahoma 4, Ohio State 5, and Clemson and Alabama at the top with 6 and 7. In other words, Alabama has represented 20% of all teams that have ever made the college football playoff. The same amount as Oregon, Michigan State, Florida State, Washington, LSU, Cincinnati, and TCU combined. This nomination, alongside the addition of the transfer portal, makes recruits far more likely to choose Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, or Georgia. That's your only shot to make a meaningful bowl game. The path is clear. Go to a powerhouse, use the resources for a few years, and if you don't get the starting job, just transfer out, go to a different school, and play well there. There is no advantage to going to a school where you know you can be the starter day one anymore. Why would you? Just go to Ohio State, use the best resources, and if after 2 years you're not the starter, just, transfer to like LSU or something. It might work out. This is what the expansion of the playoff, alongside NIL, has the potential to fix. Now, instead of just 4 teams competing in meaningful postseason games, 12 teams will be. Far more players will have the chance and the opportunity to showcase themselves in meaningful bowl games. This is what the college football playoff would have looked like this season if the 12-team format was already in place. Georgia and Michigan would stay at the top 2 seeds, but TCU and Ohio State would drop to 5 and 6, as the top 4 spots that get first-round byes are reserved for the 4 highest-ranking conference champions. The 3 spot would then go to Clemson, which is disgusting, I know, and 4th would be Utah after their win over USC in the Pac-12 championship. You may think that's unfair, fine, but this also works to make those conference championship games matter as well. How many of you really watched every conference championship game this past season? Probably not a lot, considering we got a game like Ohio State against Purdue. Imagine how much more the ACC championship game would have mattered if UNC knew that if they beat Clemson, they would be in the playoff. We wouldn't have got a game last year like the SEC championship game, where Georgia knew it didn't matter to them whether they won or not, so they got blasted 41-24 by Alabama. Nothing else changes in the rankings other than Tulane jumping over Washington for the final playoff spot because 6 conference champions have a spot reserved in the playoff. Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, Kansas State, and Utah make 5, Tulane 6. Just imagine the matchups we get to see in important games. TCU against an underrated Tulane team that showed everybody they can compete with the best as they just beat USC in the Cotton Bowl, and Tajay Spears would get his day in front of a national audience that he deserves to boost his draft stock. Penn State would get their rematch against Ohio State after they led late in the game earlier this year before JT Tuimoloau kind of wrecked their dreams. We would get to see this year's Heisman winner Caleb Williams take on last year's Heisman winner Bryce Young. Nick Saban and his dynasty that's been reigning for 20 years against Lincoln Riley and the one he's trying to start in LA. Tennessee without Hendon Hooker at QB, but now their future on display with Joe Milton against a reinvigorated Kansas State team looking to prove that their win over TCU wasn't a fluke and that they can play with anybody. And that's just the first round. And I hear you saying, but then we would lose those incredible semifinal games that we saw earlier this year. And I get it, and I would be sad to lose those games. I understand. But in the new format, there's more of a chance for more incredible games to happen with more meaningful games every year. And let's be honest with ourselves, the semifinals this year may have been amazing, but the semifinal of past years were never really that exciting or competitive. Last year, both were 20-plus point blowouts, and the year before that. The year before that, LSU embarrassed Oklahoma 63-28, and the year before that, Notre Dame only scored 3 to Clemson's 30. Now with all these teams having a chance at the playoff every year, plus players getting paid above the table now, maybe the talent will spread around. Maybe that QB that was thinking about becoming just another Ohio State Buckeye thinks there's a better chance to showcase himself by getting Nebraska into the playoff. Or one of the best QBs in this recruiting class choosing to take over the reins at UCLA rather than a powerhouse like Michigan, where he's from. Look at all the teams that would have been in the playoff had the playoff been 12 teams from the start. Teams that have now largely been forgotten since they missed it. 2014, nothing changes in the top 4, but teams like Baylor, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Arizona are now in. 2015, teams like Iowa, who had a magical season and just barely missed out, still get a chance to compete. 2016, Penn State not only gets in, but is top 4 this time because they won the Big Ten championship after they were originally left out by the committee all those years ago in favor of Ohio State. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. My point is, teams that would have never had a chance to make the playoff unless they had an undefeated season out of nowhere now get their recognition, now get their chance. Teams like UCF, who had that incredible run back in 2017 and 2018. Those Jonathan Taylor-led Wisconsin teams that didn't get their chance but came up just short. Penn State would be looked at as a constant playoff force, not a team that's constantly on the outside looking in. Last year, because of Georgia's SEC championship loss, they don't fall just to 3, they fall to 5, with their spot taken in the top 4 by Big 12 champ Baylor. A great Notre Dame team and Brian Kelly's last season there has a chance to redeem themselves. And a team with players like Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison have a chance to put themselves on the map against what is widely considered the best team in the country. And this is why I can't wait for the 12-team playoff to get here. It might not fix all of college football's problems, but it might fix a few. And if nothing else, at the very least, we get to watch more important college football games every year. Who wouldn't want that? Except my girlfriend. I know she might not be happy about it. Anyways, like and subscribe. That's the end of the video. Let me know anything you want to let me know in the comments. Always like talking to you guys. Anyways, appreciate it if you made it this far. See ya. The eventual Rose Bowl MVP, the eventual